Good morning, everyone. We are just getting started here. Thanks for joining us here today. My name is Dave Kluger, the Principal Technology Architect at Storcom. And along with us here, we also have Jose Cornejo from HPE, and he's going to be presenting alongside with me. So we're just waiting for another minute or so. Look at two more people who are just joining here, and then we'll get started here. So give us about another 30 seconds or so. Okay. We go ahead and get started here. So again, thank you all for joining. As I said, my name is Dave Kluger, Principal Technology Architect at Storcom, and alongside I have Jose Cornejo from HPE. Just going to start off with a little background on Storcom, our interaction with Hyperconverged infrastructure, which is what we're going to be talking about here today, along with a little bit of background on us. We've been in business for 20 years. We were started in the year 2000. And we've always been focusing on the management, movement, and protection of data, and have always tended to work with the kind of we'll call it the next generation technologies that allowed our clients to do more with their IT spend and solve more challenges with that with those infrastructure investments. And with that being said, that's always kind of lent us to looking at technology that kind of changed the landscape for IT. And Hyperconverged, basically starting off in around 2013 is when companies like Nutanix and SimpliVity both were founded. Prior to HPE purchasing SimpliVity, SimpliVity was a standalone company, and they were purchased by HPE, but they had started off in the around 2013. And their founders and the people who developed their technology were looking for basically a better way to deal with infrastructure based upon the hyperscale technologies that were all being used within the large cloud platforms, and trying to figure out a way to bring that into the standard IT market and infrastructure space. So we were back in 2014. We were the first Midwest reseller of SimpliVity. We were doing lab testing early on before that point, doing testing of Nutanix, SimpliVity. We also looked at technologies like Maxta and vSAN, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. That is the VMware solution, but early on, that was still its own standalone product at that point, which was technology that VMware actually acquired also. And was it about 2016 when we really started to see some traction in the HCI market space, and Storcom, we got our first win with a SimpliVity opportunity, and then we brought in also in that same time frame. We still have a number of the largest SimpliVity deployments within the HPE family. And then we started to do an additional technology integration with the HPE SimpliVity platform with things like file level recovery for HPE SimpliVity, rapid DR solution, which is another component to what Jose is going to be talking about, and some of the capabilities around what SimpliVity is able to do. And we also developed our own kind of practices around doing ransomware remediation within the HPE SimpliVity family. And now where we're at is really kind of the next generation of where is SimpliVity going, and we'll talk about that here briefly when we start talking about the converged infrastructure. So just high level, kind of a primer for everybody. If you know this, then probably a repeat. And if you're not familiar with HCI and where it kind of came from, I'm just going to go over this kind of high level. So I think everybody's familiar with the legacy stack of a three-tiered architecture where you have server, storage, and networking in between, as well as the fact that you also have typically in that stack too. Over the last 10 years, we saw things like WAN optimization bundled in with this, storage caching to increase performance, backup appliances probably were a part of that mix. Definitely using solid state has certainly become, whether it's a hybrid or an all-flash solution, become part of the mainstay for IT infrastructure. So that kind of made up the legacy stack. So converged infrastructure 1.0 was the big compute and storage infrastructure vendors out there kind of combine their resources and produce solutions. So EMC and Cisco and NetApp. There was a number of solutions from their product families, and they were basically taking more of an integrated systems approach. They took basically servers and storage and networking and combined them together, and they were designed around high availability, high performance, and what it was really a bundled solution. And a lot of it, to a certain extent, was marketing. They gave you a 600-page manual, said this is how you connect all the stuff together. These are the cables you're going to need. This is the hardware you're going to need. You have to use exactly the infrastructure that they wanted you to use. So if it was a NetApp solution with Cisco, you had to use certain Cisco switches with it, and all that infrastructure was kind of purchased together. Sometimes in some of these solutions, as they developed, there was a web, HTML portal to managing this, but that was really kind of the converged concept of 1.0. Now again, with the eye at the same time was early development was going on at that point from the real HCI players, and at that point it was really Nutanix and SimpliVity with the hyperscale technologies that were out there, which is what Google, Amazon were using. All the big cloud providers at that point were using what was called hyperscale technology. And the problem with hyperscale technology was it was complex. Although it allowed you to use commodity hardware, it was fairly complex to manage and didn't really scale down to where IT organizations were going to need. So Converge 2.0 was basically starting to take that and partially converge this. You're taking compute and storage and combining that into a solution. And when they started to collapse that's where the first Converge 2.0 solutions were really going after kind of more the tier 2 and tier 3 platforms for things like VDI and so forth. It wasn't until really Converge 3.0, which is really where the whole stack gets combined. This is where we're moving away from the architecture of storage and compute, and we're putting that into a server where we're then distributing that storage across multiple nodes. And depending on what technology you're using, there's additional advanced features that come along that with things like versioning and replication and so forth, but we're really kind of collapsing all that. And that's kind of where SimpliVity really took its ground and showed, really the marketplace what its capabilities were able to do from the standpoint of combining truly, data protection, networking, management of a VMware environment, storage, compute, all those things that we need to be able to manage and collapsing that into the VMware stack. With Convergence 4.0, that's where we're kind of going today. And that's the next generation of what technology and where hyperconverged is going at this point. So that's kind of an overview of where hyperconverged kind of came from and where it's going. With that said, I'll just open up and see if there's any questions on that at this point. So it looks like there's a question. Someone's asking about where is hyperconverged 4.0 going? So from that standpoint, a lot of what, at least HP and Jose will get into this, a lot of what they're investing in right now from a technology standpoint is leveraging artificial intelligence, AI, and something called INFOSIGHT, which is a platform that was purchased by HP also when they made another acquisition in a company called Nimble. That technology allows them to get a lot of insight into what these workloads are doing, and provide better insight into managing a VM environment, as well as the networking, and as well as the physical hardware. INFOSIGHT and its AI engine aren't just specific to SimpliVity, they follow across the entire IT infrastructure stack now within the HPE portfolio. So that's kind of where things are going at this point. With that said, I am going to turn it over to Jose. Jose, you can go ahead and start giving the next level of integration and explaining, where HPE is taking it with SimpliVity.
Sounds great, Dave. Thank you so very much for that. Good morning to everyone on the line here. My name is Jose Cornejo, and I am a hybrid IT sales specialist for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. My main focus is all around hybrid infrastructure for both on-prem as well as cloud-based solutions. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you this morning. In addition to being pleased to be on this webinar, just a few things for our Storcom folks. Storcom is the primary go-to partner for all hyperconverged solutions for Hewlett Packard in the Chicagoland area. What's unique about Storcom is that they're one of the very few across the nation who holds one of the highest accreditations for being able to deploy, manage, and help customers navigate from traditional infrastructure onto hybrid compute infrastructure. So I'm very pleased to be partnering with them. As I begin through this presentation, this is going to be intended to be a high-level overview. My goal is to ensure that you guys hear enough about the solution to allow you to ask yourself more questions about why would this be beneficial to me. So let's go ahead and get started. Hyperconverged as a whole has really changed the way that IT is managed. Its main purpose was to make life easier for the VMware admin, in that it's simple to deploy. Simplicity came about through having a software-defined architecture that allow us to abstract it from the hardware, removing fixed challenges that were allocated based on certain things you couldn't do. So now having a software-defined architecture that allows you to make changes on the fly really has made what deployment that much easier. Seeing it as a single pool of resources, again, it's about easy deployment. There's not enough to be said about the idea of being able to manage it through vCenter, which is a great resource that everyone's already used to if you're managing a VMware environment. You have a unified management overview of how to manage your entire VM infrastructure without the need for complex or standalone management stations. And lastly, it's easy to scale. It's easy for you to be able to identify areas of growth and expansion. There are a couple of things we'll get through in a couple of seconds here, but the whole idea behind all of this is that Hyperconverged is intended to make life easier for the IT organization so that they can focus on other initiatives as opposed to day-to-day administration. As we look at hyperconverged solutions, one of the things that HPE has recognized, and Dave touched on, is the fact that other hyperconverged solutions have in fact done what I mentioned, the collapsing of both compute and storage. However, there's still a couple of other challenges associated with that. The only HCI solution in the marketplace is SimpliVity, that allows you to have a complete solution built in, where every other HCI solution requires the addition of additional software and appliances that SimpliVity is able to provide in a native manner. Most other systems also require a considerable amount of tuning to optimize their infrastructure. This is something that's native to the way that SimpliVity manages all of its workloads to ensure that you are getting the optimal performance, as well as gaining the best resiliency across the number of nodes that make up your infrastructure. And lastly, it's really about making sure that you have an easy way to upgrade your infrastructure and add additional nodes to your configuration. Generally, with HCI deployments, one of the most common things that we see that customers run out of is compute and memory. What SimpliVity allows you to do is to add something called a compute node, which is just another standard server, to the ecosystem of SimpliVity to be able to make use of its CPU and memory to be able to run additional VMs while making use of the data stores that are within the SimpliVity nodes. This gives customers a great opportunity to expand and grow as their needs change. One of the things that Dave mentioned was what is separating HP from everyone else. Clearly, we're in an age where advancements are constantly being made, and Hewlett-Packard has really embraced the idea of artificial intelligence, the idea of being able to have an AI-driven infrastructure that's autonomous, that's self-healing, that's predictive, and self-optimizing. And I'll talk a little bit about how we were able to do that. But these are the things that have really propelled SimpliVity as a whole to where it is today, to be recognized as the #1 hyperconverged solution in the marketplace. If we walk down memory lane and we start from left to right, we see that our traditional infrastructure that Dave laid out was complex. It was manual, it was reactive, and it was wasteful. In that we had multiple support contracts, we had multiple appliances, we required different subject matter expertise to be able to adequately manage, and it was really quite time consuming. Software defined gave us the automation that hardware confined didn't give us. We were able to make changes on demand. We were still reactive though, but it was still definitely more efficient than the hardware confined approach. And I already mentioned this, AI is really taking it to the next level, in that it's a continuous improvement effort to ensure that it's not enough to have a great solution that you can automate. Does it have the ability to self-heal when it identifies a problem? Can it be intelligent enough to identify a potential issue before something happens? This is where predictive analysis comes into play. And I'll talk about that in the next coming slides here. So when we look at what SimpliVity is all about, is providing you, the user, the ability to do self-managing, self-healing, and self-optimizing. The way that Hewlett-Packard is able to do this is through something we called INFOSIGHT. And I want to walk you through where it started. Back in 2001, Hewlett-Packard began to collect data points of all of our compute and storage appliances. We began to leverage an AI early adoption of predictive support automation. Through 2014, 2017, and 2020, where we stand today, we've collected over 1,250 trillion data points. These are data points that have allowed Hewlett-Packard to identify specific scenarios and correlation of different data points, such as firmware, software updates, changes within the environment, application versions, and identify that under certain conditions, having certain things that check off could potentially create an issue. The end user gets an alert ahead of time saying, please don't, you are not allowed to do the following upgrade, in that it's detected to create a problem for you. Instead, revert to this particular version. That's where the predictive portion comes in to help you as the administrator make sure that you stay out of trouble and out of harm's way, even though you were thinking that by doing the update, you were actually doing something beneficial. Keep in mind that over 80% of the outages that occur in the environments today are self-induced. This isn't out of malicious activities, but rather an attempt to try to correct an issue. But in the absence of not knowing or having access to all of the different updates that the different manufacturers are telling you to not do, all of this has been integrated and is done through our AI platform, giving you the latest information and removing a lot of the manual steps that you would otherwise have to take. What we've essentially are saying is that we're able to save about 1.58 million hours because of this predictive analysis in helping customers avoid issues and problems. I certainly hope that you guys see this as a fantastic way of managing your IT while giving you more valuable time to get the work that you need to get completed. When we talk about architecture as a whole, guys, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, are we using the right architecture? There really isn't a silver bullet that can account for all. Instead, we have to ask ourselves key questions like, how many virtual machines am I going to support? What type of applications am I going to use? What kind of capacity am I expected to see over time? Are there any requirement limitations on space? What about SLAs and performance, availability, and protection? All of these are questions that you ask yourselves on a daily basis. So what we at HP have identified is the following. It's finding the right tool for the right job. Having said that, Hewlett-Packard is happy to provide you with two architectural choices. And the one we're going to speak to specifically is Hyperconverged, but I also want to touch briefly on something we call disaggregated HCI. Hyperconverged is the typical solution that 90% of our customers lead on. And the reason for that is because they tend to be great solutions in the data center for general purpose applications. They scale ridiculously well at the edge, at your data center, and your remote offices. It's easy to collapse compute and storage together, and it provides the most simplest management of all platforms. In the case of disaggregate HCI, we see about 10% of the workloads that fall into this category. This is ideal for organizations that have critical apps, but like the idea of being able to independently scale compute and storage from one another. And it's extremely flexible, but still at the cost of SimpliVity. One of the things I want to touch on when we get into this is more specific slides around what are the workloads associated with SimpliVity. I'll give you a little bit of background. SimpliVity was a purpose-built or is a purpose-built solution for the general workload. Through its infancy and its beginnings, it was intended to be able to accommodate mixed workloads with a fanatical view for redundancy as well as performance. And I'm going to touch on that in a couple of slides, but we'll continue to go through this solution here. I want to, I'd be hard pressed if I didn't talk about some of the value propositions that that the solution brings. While at a high level, you can see that AI being efficient, being developed for mixed workloads sounds like phenomenal technical attributes. What about from a business context perspective? I'm happy to share the following with you. You guys are familiar with both IDC and Forrester. These folks actually conducted an independent survey and analysis of comparing traditional storage against SimpliVity, and here are the things that they discovered. The first one is that when customers transitioned from legacy tiered architectures to SimpliVity, they were able to find 91% more time to be able to innovate, and whether that's to move to cloud-based solutions or to move to other strategic types of services. And this was as a direct result of being able to streamline the way that you support and manage your ecosystem by removing all the complexity that you otherwise had in those legacy tiers. The second one was that customers saw an ROI of 183% that typically paid itself back within the year. Now, how did this actually happen? Well, if we remember the previous slide that Dave was kind enough to share, where he identified 15 different appliances. Each of those appliances constitutes a discrete support contract. We're able to eliminate all of that, and by virtue of being able to do economies of scale, we're able to optimize as well as streamline the way that you support and manage your ecosystem, and that's where we saw the majority of that payback happening within the 1 year period. 69% cost savings when you are comparing that to having to buy individual appliances one at a time. And clearly that's a big issue because I know you guys are constantly being asked to do more with less. Your leadership is constantly asking you to revise or reduce your budgets. So this is a great way to not only accommodate the needs of the business and being fiscally responsible, but giving you the opportunity to move into a more streamlined architecture that will ultimately help you save time and energy as you look at managing your ecosystem. One thing that I think would probably catch you by surprise, I'm sure, is Hewlett-Packard has a guarantee, and within this guarantee, we guarantee that we can recover a 1 terabyte virtual machine in under 60 seconds. This is a written guarantee by Hewlett-Packard that says that after we've done the analysis for you and we've concluded that we've identified a solution, if we are unable to make that claim of being able to restore a 1 terabyte virtual machine in under 60 seconds, Hewlett-Packard will actually give you, the customer, not the partner, Hewlett-Packard directly will give you free hardware until we make that right. How many other large Fortune 500 companies do you know in the industry that can actually make a claim like this? There really aren't. And lastly, it's a simple interface. If you're familiar with vCenter, you already know SimpliVity, in that it's nothing more than just a plugin. You're able to backup, clone, restore virtual machines at a moment's notice. And we'll get into a little bit of that in just a couple of minutes. When it's all said and done, we have this SimpliVity Hyper Guarantee that I mentioned a few minutes ago. At this point, I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions that we have from the audience.
Hi, Jose. One of our attendees had asked the question of why they haven't heard of this solution before.
That's a great question, actually. Hewlett-Packard is a company that's been around for over 80 years now. We've got a lineage of being a very strong, dominant engineering company. However, we're horrible at marketing to the extent that if Hewlett-Packard sold sushi, we basically advertise it as "come get your raw dead fish," simply because we are that scientific. We're not a marketing machine, guys, and unfortunately, that has been probably our single biggest challenge that has prevented a solution like SimpliVity to really gain more of the insight, and probably why the question was posed. But that's a great question. Let's continue with the rest of the slides here, and then we'll pause for more questions in just a few minutes. One of the things I want to walk you through is what specifically makes SimpliVity unique. And again, guys, these are very high-level data points that I'm going to talk through. First and foremost, we do what is referred to as inline deduplication and compression. And we guarantee a 90% savings. And this is guaranteed part of our hyper guarantee. And what we're basically saying here is that we guarantee that we're going to provide you a 10-to-1 compression ratio. And once again, if we don't need that, we'll give you free hardware. Now, you can imagine that Hewlett-Packard, being a pretty big company, is not in the industry of giving people free hardware. Our industry average is a 42-to-1 compression ratio when they utilize our solutions, and they're using that to back up and restore all of their virtual machines. The way we're able to do this is simply by the optimization that we'll cover in just a couple of minutes. The next point here is resiliency. Dave did a great job of showing you how we were able to collapse all of that legacy infrastructure onto SimpliVity node. We have built-in resiliency built into the nodes, and we also provide a unique aspect of it, which is built-in disaster recovery. Think about this for a second. You've got a cluster of nodes inside A and another cluster inside B. And one of the things you want to do is you want to be able to restore those virtual machines that you have because they've gone down as a result of a complete site failure. What if I were to tell you that you have the ability to identify the virtual machines that you want to bring up at the other location, move them and power them up in the order that you want them, and have them re-IP address for you? We provide a GUI-based system that allows you to do all of this. Many of these types of functions are typically attributes that require a considerable amount of scripting via Chef, Puppet, or Ansible. This removes that complexity by giving you a graphical interface that allows you to identify, drag and drop, and enter the IP addresses of those devices. It's all built in, something that no other product in the industry can do today. We're able to improve performance across our platform in a couple of different ways. I mentioned that inline deduplication and compression. We have a hardware accelerated card that does all of that offloading for us. And what that basically means to us is that before a block of data is written onto the disk, it is first inspected. If that data doesn't exist, it is inline deduped and compressed on the fly. The next time the same data is attempted to be written to the disk and it identifies that it already exists, we then use a metadata architecture to track that particular data and map it, as opposed to having to rewrite the data. As a result of being able to do this, we're accomplishing several key things. We are able to, one, remove I/O that's unneeded, which ultimately increases performance for you as the end users and your applications. Two, we're able to conserve disk space in that there's no need to rewrite the same data that already exists. And three, most other solutions in the marketplace are either going to do this post or pre, meaning that if they do post, you're going to ingest all the data the way that it typically comes in its FAT native format, and then it'll go through and optimize it. which will then take up CPU cycles from the environment. Or if they do it inline, it's doing it by making use of the existing processor and ultimately taking CPU cycles from end user requests. The next key attribute here is what we call unified management. And we touched on this just a minute ago. I mentioned the importance of being able to make use of the tool that you already have and own and you're comfortable with, being vCenter, and being able to manage your entire ecosystem across that very simple management tool. Again, no additional training or management stations required. From a flexible resource pool, I touched on a compute node, the ability to be able to add additional servers to your ecosystem and make use of their CPU and their processors memory as well to be able to address mixed workloads. I mentioned earlier that that typically is the first resource to go, and SimpliVity gives you ways of not only being able to do that by upgrading internal memory to your environment, but if you've maxed out your nodes, you can simply add additional servers that you have available and make efficient use of them. And obviously, it wouldn't be HP without me saying that this comment. It's based on the most secure foundation and server in the world, our HP DL platform. Hopefully this is something that's starting to resonate with you guys, and we're really excited about that. This is a fantastic graphical representation of our built-in backup and disaster recovery solution and why we are ultimately able to reduce costs and remove risk. Think about the appliances that you would need. So, our competitors like Nutanix or VxRail do a good job of standard consolidation of storage and compute. However, they still require the need of some type of backup media or tape infrastructure to be able to back everything up. Not only that, but they're also going to need to require additional software licenses to be able to operate that along with service contracts. They're going to rely on a number of different tools to do that. And then what about disaster recovery? Disaster recovery is actually a very expensive add-on that you'll either use through VMware's SRM or through Zerto. So for any of you guys who have evaluated disaster recovery options, you can conclude that the cost of those solutions are pretty high. All of these are built into SimpliVity. And then from a WAN optimization, one of the things that's unique that SimpliVity does is that as we distribute data between our nodes for resiliency purposes, we're sending them out in the compressed and optimized manner, which means that all of the data that is written to our nodes are optimized and compressed for the life of the data. So as data is moved around between nodes, it doesn't matter whether they're in the same rack or whether they're across continents. That data is being optimized and sent out in that format, as opposed to most other solutions where you have to go through and basically rehydrate that data, put it in its native format, which is going to be big and bulky and very large, to take up additional bandwidth and time for that data to make it across to the other location, only to then have that other appliance go through the same process of putting it and basically putting it back into a format that's more compressed and optimized. You see a lot of waste in the IOs of what other solutions are currently doing. We're happy to say that SimpliVity removes all of that from the ecosystem. So, in a nutshell, what is SimpliVity? SimpliVity is all about providing an intelligent solution for your virtual workloads. It's intelligent, it's simple, it's efficient, and it's optimized. Several things that just, again, I want to make sure you guys really get, and again, this is not intended to be a know-all. It's not a deep dive technical session. It's just a high-level overview. SimpliVity gives you all of this in one system. We're collapsing stacks, we're removing silos, and we provide built-in backup and disaster recovery. We give you that centralized management through vCenter. And we're happy to tell you that we offer one-click upgrades to make your lifecycle management simple across your environment, to be able to update your firmware, your hypervisors, and the operating system of SimpliVity, all with no downtime. And that gets into our downtime refresh. So all of these can be done live so that you don't have to take anything out of production in order to be able to go through the process. I also mentioned the fact earlier in my slides, the fact that we have this automated tuning that essentially removes the need of constant modifications and making changes. The system will auto-tune to ensure that it's operating the most efficient manner without you having to get manually involved. And then the last item here is the global intelligence that we provide through AI and INFOSIGHT that we covered earlier, which is really a game changer for anyone in the market today. This is another graphical illustration of the number of appliances that we're collapsing. We're removing silos. We're removing the need of having to have specialized individuals to manage each of those particular areas. And at the end of the day, guys, while we are all IT specialists, we're in it to ensure that we are making the most efficient use of the company's IT resources. And this allows us to be able to deliver on multiple fronts. It makes your life easier from an administrative point of view, and it allows you to be able to deliver a solution that scales and at a much lower price point. And that's just something that's a win-win for everyone involved. Let's talk a little bit about the efficiencies that we gain here. We mentioned the 90% capacity guarantee because of the inline compression and deduplication efforts. So we're guaranteeing a 10-to-1 compression ratio. Our industry average is 42-to-1. We're able to restore virtual machines in under 60 seconds, and our average is less than 10 seconds. And again, guys, this kind of gets into specifics. Let me just touch on this for a second. We had a customer who was running SimpliVity in their assembly line, and one of their SQL databases became corrupt. They were obviously very, frantic about like, oh my gosh, the minute that database went down, they had to basically stop all of operations at that manufacturing plant. They were able to restart a previous version of that virtual machine in under 10 seconds, allowing the business to continue to operate. Ask yourself this question: what are my RTOs and RPOs? And the idea of being able to go from hours down to minutes, that's a massive change, guys, that allows you to be in position to be able to be seen as a business enabler. It's not just about the out time, but it's about being able to recover in the event of a failure. And then we get into system efficiencies, right? The ability to remove all of the hardware restrictions that are placed by moving into a software-defined architecture where you're using software abstracts to allocate and provision storage and CPU across your entire cluster infrastructure, because it's all done through a software abstract. This gives you the flexibility that you otherwise didn't have. Now, think about the efficiencies when you are talking about remote locations, not just in your data center. How many of you may have specific remote sites where you have the same or similar requirements, except in a much smaller fashion that you do in your data center down at your remote locations? What about being able to have a very small appliance that can be used, also that's SimpliVity based, because we have solutions that we often refer them in t-shirt sizes from extra small to extra large, and have the same ability to, the same way you manage your data center, being able to manage your remote locations. Simplicity, guys, that's really what we're all about here. All right, so as we start getting into more of the specific, guys, in a nutshell, INFOSIGHT, which is our AI capabilities, gives us predictive resource planning. It gives us visibility analytics across the board, and it allows us to be able to better manage cases. In the case of predictive analysis, it gives us insight into helping us understand and predict when we may reach capacity. It's all about having the right instrumentation at your fingertips so that you are not in a reactive mode, but rather be proactive. With regards to visibility and analytics, what about the ability to not only be able to determine root cause failures or analysis, then by being able to do correlation between your firmware, your software, your versions, and your VMs, being able to identify noisy VMs ahead of time before they become problematic, and being able to get in front of these problems. And then with case automation, because of INFOSIGHT, we have the ability that if we detect any kind of hardware failure, or we're seeing any kind of threshold level that we've previously identified that can lead to a component failure, we will ship you in advance a hardware, that particular hardware, schedule your maintenance so that we can actually prevent issues and outages from actually occurring in the first place. Again, guys, it's all about being proactive and being in front of the solution, in front of the problem versus being reactive, which is unfortunately where the limitations of the old hardware has kind of kept us down to. One-click upgrades, simple, non-disruptive, and efficient. Think about long nights and weekends that most of us have at some point in our times have had to endure. We often joke within our community base, and our running joke is that we don't sell HCI solutions, we sell nights and weekends. And this particular slide really hits home as it relates to that. One of the things I'm really happy to talk about is, you know, Hewlett-Packard is really all about providing you, the customer, with a complete solution. I made the comment earlier about having data that was optimized and compressed for the life of the data. And now we get into data management strategies. Let's talk about when data is first entered into our ecosystem. The question then becomes, where does it go to? How long do we retain it for? How often do we back it up? And then what are our regulatory compliances to keep that data available for a certain period of time? Well, we're happy to basically provide a solution that from inception all the way through retirement that is maintained using the same SimpliVity software across our nodes and now into our HPE StorOne appliances. These are very low cost data storage solutions for long-term archival. So that means that the same native compression that you have from SimpliVity is automatically moved over to StorOne, and it's seen just as another component within your ecosystem of SimpliVity. Nothing special or unique, same software, same everything. So now you have the ability to be able to say, I've got a solution that is not only going to be optimized from the very first time it's written at an 8K block to my system, but all the way through retirement. This gives you guys tremendous visibility, control, and management. One thing that I didn't touch on, and again, this is kind of covered more when we get into our deeper technical conversations, we see tremendous efficiencies across all the applications that you see here, Oracle, Exchange, Red Hat. And the reason for that is simply because of our efficiencies in the way that we remove I/O from the environment. Depending on the application, we can see anywhere between a 60 to a 20% performance increase by simply moving over to SimpliVity. And these are performance gains that, remember guys, it's not just about having system availability. We live in a society where if it doesn't instantly come on after you click, something is wrong with the environment. We're able to get in front of all of that by providing an enhanced performed solution that makes you guys look good in the eyes of everyone you're managing and supporting. From a cloud connections point of view, SimpliVity has hooks into Google Cloud's Anthon, and we have extended data protections with on-prem and off-prem cloud providers. And we also provide something through GreenLake. One of the things that makes the folks at Storcom unique from everyone else is that you can also select Storcom to be your provider to have all of your backup and restores from, and that they also provide SimpliVity-based services in-house. Again, the only one in the state of Illinois to do this, and they are leading the efforts with regards to that. So I'm very happy to work with our Storcom team on a regular basis because we see that not only do they have the technical acumen, the experience, and the know-how, but they live this on a day-to-day basis as they provide these services to their existing customers and new ones as well. I'll pause here for any questions for the team.
Hi, Jose. Our attendees have a few questions for you. The first is that they're looking for a system to support Horizon VDI and NVIDIA GPU, where high performance is critical. Does SimpliVity offer anything for this?
Absolutely. One of the use cases that SimpliVity is really for is for VDI. So yes, we have specific products that are geared to accommodate the needs of VDI end users. And the great thing again is that within Storcom, they have subject matter experts that they are able to work with to get that expertise and recommendations from. So I would urge that they set up a call with one of the Storcom team members to go into this particular conversation, because this is one of the areas where SimpliVity really shines.
The next question is, what are the minimum number of nodes that can be deployed to allow easy expansion of storage and compute and GPU?
Sure. So generally speaking, from a production point of view, we generally want to start with at least 2 nodes. And the reason for that is that, you never want to just start with one, because if that node were to fail, obviously you have no redundancy. So typically a 2 node is where we start. A lot of it is going to really be based on the requirements that are needed. But typically we start with a 2 node configuration, and based on those unique requirements, that'll grow into additional nodes, or will change the properties of how many GPUs, memories, and processors that will be used for the solution.
The next question is, does SimpliVity offer NVMe?
We don't today, but it is something that is on the roadmap. The reason why we don't, and this is one of the things that I want to call out, is that NVMe is a phenomenal solution. But now we're getting into the nuts and bolts, meaning that with NVMe, you've got to have an ecosystem that every aspect of your architecture supports, meaning the hardware, all the hardware, your network interface cards, your servers, your switches. All of that has to be in alignment. And then even then, the performance gains between that and a non-NVMe using Rocky, we get into the tenths of improvements that's going to make. Now, that's not to say that it's not a great solution, but now you get into an economy of scales of saying, okay, for 80%, for 20% of the effort, I can get 80% of the return. But to get the remaining 20%, I've got to put in 80% of the effort. That's kind of one way to look at it. And while, again, it's not something that we have, the improvements that I'm referencing are marginal, but marginal to what is marginal to one company may be something huge for someone else. So it would be a conversation that we would have to talk about how that would assist them, but it is in the roadmap.
The next question is, where can screenshots or demos of the control panel and user interfaces or dashboards be seen?
You see that within a vCenter. Within vCenter, there is a plugin. You go under the SimpliVity portion of that plugin, and you'll be able to go and look and get statistics on the usage of the cluster of a specific host and of a specific virtual machine. No different than you would when doing vCenter.
And the next question is, one of our attendees was wondering how they could find out more about SimpliVity, who they should work with, and what the next steps are.
Sure. My recommendation, guys, is that you have phenomenal expertise within Storcom. My recommendation would be to first start by reaching out to the Storcom team. Again, because they have subject matter expertise and the level of accreditation and certifications that they've gained with HPE, they are our premier partner to go to. We partner with Storcom on a regular basis. I am happy to be a participant in any conversation, along with bringing additional subject matter expertise. But to be very candid, by all purposes, Storcom can pretty much do 99.9% of what is required. Where I can come in is in the event that there's something unique or different that's currently not being offered, where I can help advocate and help get something created or pushed through R&D for that purposes. But otherwise, my response to you would be to make sure you reach out to Storcom because you will find great resources there that are going to be able to assist you with any of your questions.
That's all for questions, guys.
Okay, fantastic.
Well, thank you, Jose, very much for doing a great job of explaining the SimpliVity solution, and hopefully everybody gained some knowledge out of this. And as Jose said, absolutely please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to get the chance to talk to a little bit more about projects you've got going on and see where SimpliVity would be a good fit. I think, as we said earlier on, and as Jose's highlighted, we do have a lot of experience with this solution, and as well as I think also being able to understand the other solutions in the market too, and explain some of the differences and the where SimpliVity really has some advantages over what else is out there on the market. So from that standpoint, if you are looking at other solutions like vSAN or Nutanix, we can help provide some insight there. And I think one thing too, Jose, we didn't really go into here, but it's important to point out that SimpliVity is one solution of maybe of quite a few solutions that fit in the HPE portfolio. So we're an HPE partner, and we know all of the solutions that they're working with. Our job is to help you guys find the right solution. It's not necessarily a one size fits all, although SimpliVity does cover a vast majority of different workloads. But there is more to the total HPE portfolio. We haven't didn't necessarily dive down into that today, but just want to point that out.
No, that's a great point, Mike.
So, okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.